In this video, we're going to run through the test results of a model and see if any fixes or improvements in performance are needed. Here I've got a model set up in Microsoft Lewis. It's just a very simple model based on banking questions and contains just 18 intents. And I'm ready to test it to check the performance of it. So I need to download the file, and then I can go to QBox and I can create my job. So I'm just downloading the file and creating job. So this is the results of the test. As you can see, the three metrics are 74 for correctness. This is how correctly the model can predict the right outcome. 75 for confidence. This is how confident the model is about that prediction. And 82 for stability, which means this is how stable the correctness and confidence will stay over time. QBox has classed these scores as either OK or good. But obviously these scores can be improved upon because they are out of a maximum of 100. On the right, you can see the score distribution graph. This shows the distribution of each intent by bracket of score. So we've got 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, etc. For our model, there is one intent that is marked in red for correctness. This means that the score is very low. Below 50 will show intents in red. And we also have a few intents in amber and a couple in green. You can also click on the confidence and stability tabs to see the scores for those shown on this graph. And there's also a few red ones here as well. As we go down, we can also see that QBox is warning us that within our model there are 3 intents that have fewer than the 5 minimum recommended amount of training data. These will need to be addressed at some point to improve model performance. Our experience has proved that aiming for around 10 to 15 training data for each intent works very well. Now, if we go to the score tab, here we can see the full list of intents in your model. And this is ordered by correctness score with the lowest correctness score intent at the top. Any intents with this triangle warning indicates that these are one of the intents that has got the less than 5 training data within them. This will probably be the main reason why those intents are scoring so low on all 3 metrics. So it may seem a little daunting to see so many red and amber intents with very low scores. However, just start by concentrating on the lowest scoring intent for correctness and try to make improvements to that one before moving on to the next lowest scoring intent for correctness. Once correctness scores have been improved, you should then look to see lower scoring confidence and then lower scoring stability intents and try to improve those ones too. But always start with improving correctness scores first, because generally once correctness increases, it will increase the confidence and stability scores. They will usually follow suit. So let's look at the lowest scoring intent, which is the contact intent. In basic view, we can see that there are 2 questions or training data that are classed as incorrect and would return unexpected intents. You might wonder why these questions are incorrect when in fact they do exist in your model under the correct intent as training data. The way the testing works is that the question is tested against the whole model based on being trained without that particular question. This is similar to the leave one out testing. If the question then returns an unexpected intent, this indicates weak concepts within the intent and is then likely to cause confusion within the model. We can also see under the needs improving section there are 2 questions which have either low confidence or low stability scores, and they will need to be looked at some point too. If you want to go to a deeper analysis, you will need to go into advanced view. From the correctness distribution diagram, we can see that there are 2 questions that are in red. These are our incorrect questions. Ideally, all questions should be green and well within this centre circle, as this is the contact intent. The circles in grey on the outside are the ones that are confused areas. Let's pin these 2 incorrect questions. So they appear up here. Let's just move on to the confidence ones, and we can see that there are 2 questions that are just slightly outside of our confidence threshold, which is shown here. So let's pin these 2 questions as well. These will be our focus questions. So we have the 2 incorrect ones and the 2 correct ones, but below confidence. Moving on to the stability diagram, we can see that there are 2 in red and 2 in amber, and these were already highlighted because these are the ones here that we've already pinned. So by fixing the issues with the correctness and the confidence, this should then help with the stability too. So let's just go back to the incorrect questions. The first incorrect one, I want to call you, is getting confused with the afford intent. Let's just click on show more. And we can see from the colour-coded highlights that the model has picked up on the smaller insignificant words of I, want and to. We need to strengthen the concept of calling. If we go back to the pinned questions, we can see the concepts here. No concepts have been picked up. So what I would do is strengthen the concept of calling and perhaps be a little bit more specific about calling the bank. So let's go back to our Lewis model and pick up the contact intent. And we can add some more questions. I need to call you, and perhaps I would like to call the bank. And how can I call my bank? That should help with that question. Let's go back to the second one we pinned. I want your telephone number. If we click on show more, we can see that telephone has been picked up from the incorrect intent of telephone banking. So we need to strengthen the concept of wanting the actual telephone number. If we can see the pinned area, we can see it's picked up the concept of number, but there is only one question about wanting the telephone number. So if we go back to our Lewis model and add a couple more questions to strengthen this intent. So we'll say, tell me your telephone number. And another one, could I have the telephone number for my bank? Now, if we just go back to this one, because I did also notice something else here. So within this telephone banking intent, you can see that there are quite a few repeated phrases of I want to. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 questions with the phrase I want to in this. I would actually also recommend fixing these before it creates further problems down the line. So we need to change some of this existing training data to be a bit more varied. So if we go back to our Lewis model and pick up the telephone banking intent, and I would change this I want to I need. And then I want to do bank transactions via telephone. I would change that to can I do bank transactions via telephone, and turn that into a question. And then I want to do telephone banking. Perhaps we could change that to how do I do telephone banking and change that one into a question 2. Okay, so hopefully that should fix the repeated phrases there. We go back to the correctness distribution diagram. On the right hand side we can see that there is also a false positive. This means that training data from another intent, in this case the afford intent, is getting confused with our contact intent, and we will also need to look at that later as well. But now that we've fixed the 2 incorrect questions, we'll need to look at the low confidence questions and then the stability questions and make improvements in those. But for now, I would suggest running another test to see how we've done with those incorrect questions and see if they've been fixed. So let's just go back to our Lewis model and download the JSON file, and then we can create a new job. So within my simple bank model project, I'll call this test 2 and choose the file and create the job. This is the results of the test that we've just run. We can see that overall model correctness has increased by 6 points, confidence has increased by 2 points, and overall stability by 5 points. QBox automatically compares this test with the last test run within your project, but you can of course change the comparison and compare against any test within any of your projects here. We go further down, we can see the largest direct changes are displayed here, and this list will include any intents whose scores have changed, likely because of a change to their training data. So for our list, we can see the contact intent and the telephone banking intents are here, because these are the ones that we've either added or changed training data to. So for both intents that we can see, the scores have increased nicely. And if we move further down, we can also see there's a largest indirect or unknown changes list here. So we can see further details of these by going to the change analysis tab, and we will do that later on. An indirect change is where QBox has detected a change in another intent's training data that could have caused the change in score in one or all of its metrics. If there's an unknown change, it's where QBox could not detect any change in training data that caused the change in score in one or all of its metrics. Moving over to here, we can also see that we have still the intent warning here. There's 3 intents. It's got fewer than the recommended 5 amount of training data because we've not fixed those ones yet. So let's look at the contact intent to see if the changes we've made have been successful. In Basic View, we can now see a project score history graph here. So this shows the difference between the first test and the second test we ran, and we can see any improvements or regressions in all 3 score metrics. So we've got the blue for correctness, white for confidence, and red for stability, and we can see here that all 3 metrics are on an upward trend. Moving over to Advanced View, on the correctness distribution diagram we can see that there is one question in red, and this is, how do I contact you? So this is one that was, I believe, below confidence last time, and now is actually incorrect. So we do need to look at fixing this as well as the below confidence questions. Just moving over to the right hand side, we can now see that there are 1, 2, 3 false positives coming up for this intent. So these will need to be fixed at some point. But for now, we'll concentrate on fixing the issues with the contact intent by fixing the incorrect one and the below confidence ones. So let's just pin the ones that we need to focus on. We can see them up here. So the incorrect question, how do I contact you? This could probably be improved by adding perhaps one more question. So let's just go back to our Lewis model and back into the contact intent and add how do I contact the bank? So hopefully that should fix the incorrect one. And then we have a couple of fairly similar below confidence ones. How can I call my bank, which is only 40% confident? And I need to call you, which is only 43% confident. They can probably be improved at the same time by adding, how do I call you? And maybe I want to call my bank. And then we have tell me your telephone number. This is only 42% confident. So this could be improved, maybe add in a couple more. Give me a telephone number maybe. And what is the bank telephone number? And then the last low confidence one is give me your bank contact details, 44% confident. So this could probably be improved by adding, I want the bank contact details. And maybe one more, can I have your bank contact details? Okay, so that should hopefully fix the incorrect one and the 4 below confidence questions. Now let's just move over to the change analysis tab to see if the changes that we made to the previous test had actually had any regressions to the model. So the correctness graph shows at a glance that there is one intent that is decreased in correctness, shown in red, but there are also a few shown in green, which means that they've increased in correctness. Some of these increases in correctness will, of course, be the intents that we've just added new or amended training data for, so that will be for the contact intent and the telephone banking intent. But there are also increases in correctness for intents that we've not even touched. So this demonstrates that by strengthening concepts within one intent, it is quite likely to define more clearly other intents that perhaps were a little bit confused before. You can also click on the confidence buttons and stability buttons to see any improvements or regressions in those metrics too. We can see a few red ones in these here. By looking at the list below, you can see that the regressed intent for correctness is the small talk one, and it's an indirect cause, which means it's possibly because of the training data we've previously added. So this regression will need to be fixed, and we'll do this at a later date. There are some changes with unidentified causes, and this is where QBox cannot directly link this with the training data changes made previously, but are likely to be related. This is called the ripple effect. These ones will need to be addressed at some point, as this does indicate some instability in their training data. However, these are not priority for now. Let's run another test to see if the improvements to the below confidence questions in the contact intent has now been fixed. And if so, we can then move on to the false positives for this intent if they're applicable in the next test. So let's just go back to our Lewis model, pick up the new JSON file and create our new job. And pick up the file. And create job. So here's the results of test 3, and we can see that correctness has actually decreased by 1 point, although confidence has increased by 1 point and stability remains the same. Don't worry about slight slipping correctness here. You will sometimes see regressions as you go through your testing, but by making small, gradual improvements to the model, this should start to recover quickly. We can see in the largest direct changes area, our contact intent scores have increased nicely. And let's just move down to the largest indirect or unknown changes. It looks like there's some significant regressions in correctness for a couple of intents. So let's just pop onto the change analysis tab to view more. So we can see those two intents here. They're shown in red on the correctness distribution diagram. And we have some very slight decreases in confidence and also very slight decreases in stability here. But let's just go back to the correctness, and down to the list we can see that one of the ones is the interest rate one, that's decreased by 17 points, and the other one is the account balance, which has decreased by 9 points. However, these are unidentified causes, so this is where QBox cannot directly link this with training data changes made previously, but they could be related. So it is something that will need to be looked at some point, but for now it's not crucial, so we can move on from this. Incidentally, looking at the small talk one, which had a regression in correctness in the previous test, we can now see that that regression has now recovered nicely and it's back up to 61 points. And this is an indirect change which is likely to be training data from the previous test has had an effect on this intent. So that's good news. Okay, let's just go back to the overview and then we can click on the contact intent to see the changes that have been made here. So on the correctness distribution diagram, we can see that all questions are now green, so all are correct. Most of them are well within the central circle. There's still one that's come in slightly outside of that circle, so we could look to have an improvement on that. But for now, let's look at the false positives. So we do still have 3 false positives for this intent, one for the afford one for telephone banking, and one for small talk name. So let's look at the afford intent. So within the afford intent, we've got training data I want to buy. If we click on show more, this one is currently going to the contact intent. So from the highlighted words, you can see it's favouring I, want and to. So we need to strengthen the concept of whether the user can buy something. So let's go back to the Lewis application. Select our model and go to the afford intent, and I would add a couple of questions. Do I have the money to buy ? And I need to buy a. So hopefully that should fix that false positive. Let's go back to QBox. And the second false positive of telephone banking. So the question of can I do bank transactions via telephone is in the telephone banking intent, but it's getting confused with the contact intent. So telephone and bank is featuring more heavily in the contact intent because we've added quite a bit of training data to that one now. So it's favouring that contact intent. We need to get it back to the telephone banking one. So let's add a couple more questions to the telephone banking intent. I would add, how do I do telephone banking? Sorry, telephone bank transactions. And I would like to do bank transactions via the telephone. Oh, can't spell. So hopefully that should fix the second false positive. Let's have a look at the third false positive. So we've got the small talk name And within the Smalltalk name intent, we've got a question, what can I call you? So the concept of what to call this particular chatbot needs to be strengthened. So let's pick up the Smalltalk name. And in the what can I call you, I might strengthen that by adding what name can I call you? And then add some new ones. Tell me the name I can call you. And do you have a name I can call you? Okay, that should have cleared all three of those false positives now. So let's download the file and run another test just to make sure that we fix those. So go back to QBox, create your job, test 4, pick up the file and create our job. Okay, so from our latest test results, we can see that correctness has increased by 6 points, confidence by 2, and stability by 3 points. So this is great news. If we move down to the largest direct changes, we can see that there are 3 intents here, and these are actually the 3 that we had the false positives against the original contact intent. All 3 of these scores correctness has increased very well, so that's great news. Then let's just move down to the largest indirect unknown changes. So the biggest change here is back to our original contact intent, and we can see now that correctness has improved by another 23 points to the maximum of 100. Brilliant news. Let's just click on to the intent just to double check everything. On the correctness distribution diagram, we can see that all questions are now in green. Brilliant news. Moving over to the confidence, we can see that there are a couple of questions that are just outside of our confidence threshold. So these can be improved upon at a later date. Moving over to the stability diagram, you can see that most of the questions are now in green. We have got one that's in amber, and this is one of the ones that's below confidence. So once we've checked on the confidence on those 2 questions, this one will also help the stability too. So the last thing to check here is to see if the changes we've made have had any regression on the whole model. So let's just go over to the change analysis tab. On the correctness graph, we can see that there are a few intents that have changed, but they're in green, so that means they have increased in correctness. If we look at the confidence, very, very slight regressions in a few intents, but nothing really to worry about. And we can see here the same for stability. There's just one intent, a very, very slight regression, but nothing to worry about. And just checking down on the list, this confirms that there are no regressions in correctness. So we can now move on to our next lowest scoring intent. So let's just go to the score tab. And this will tell us that the next lowest scoring intent is the interest rate one. So this is the next one that we would concentrate on to start fixing. Let's click onto that intent. And we're going straight into advanced view. So from the correctness distribution diagram, we can see that 2 questions are incorrect, shown in red. So let's pin these 2. And then moving on to the confidence distribution diagram, we can see that there's also one question that's just outside of our confidence threshold. So let's also pin this one. And then moving on to our stability, we can see that there's 2 in red and 1 in amber, and these are the ones that we have actually already pinned. So once we focus and fix on these ones, that should then increase the stability for those 3 questions. So the first incorrect question is, does my bank account get any interest? We click on show more. We can see that it seems to be favouring the account balance intent, because there's more training questions with the word bank and account, as you can see by the highlighted words. So let's try to fix this by going into our Lewis model and picking up interest rate and add a couple more questions. So what interest does my bank account earn? And let's add one more. Will my bank account earn any interest? So hopefully that should fix that first incorrect question. The second one, what is your rate for overdrafts? Click on show more here. So this is not picking up any concept of overdrafts because there's only one question about overdraft and rates in this question, in this intent. It's highlighting insignificant words, what and is and your. So we need to strengthen the concept of overdraft rates. Let's just go back to our Lewis model and let's add, tell me your interest rate for overdrafts. And perhaps one more. How much is your interest rate for overdrafts? Oops. So going back to QBox, the below confidence question, how much interest can you earn on bank accounts? This could probably be improved by adding perhaps one additional question around that. What interest could I earn on my bank account? Okay, so the additions to these questions should fix the issues with correctness and confidence and hopefully stability at the same time. But let's just check on this by running a further test. So let's go back to our Lewis app and exporting a JSON file and create a new job. And here's the results of our latest test. As you can see, overall model scores have increased nicely. Correctness, confidence and stability have all increased by 4 points. Let's move down to the largest direct changes. We can see this features our interest rate intent, and we can see that for correctness, confidence and stability, all scores have increased massively, so that's really good news. And just quickly taking a look at the largest indirect or unknown changes, we can see that there's no regressions here in correctness, but we will take a further detailed look through this on the change analysis tab shortly. Let's just go back to our interest rate intent. We can check on the distribution diagram and there are now no questions in red. Confidence distribution diagram, we can see that there's one that's just outside of our confidence threshold here. Let's just pin that. So we could look to improve this at a later date, but there's no pressing issue here. Moving on to the stability diagram, we can see that most of our questions are in green. There's just one in amber, and this is the one that I pinned, so it's the below confidence question. Once we've changed that, that should also increase the stability score here. So this is all good. And now let's just go on to the change analysis to see if the changes that we had made to our interest rate intent has caused any issues with the overall model. So looking at the correctness graph, we can see that there are no intents in red, so there's no regression in correctness. And the same for confidence, no regressions here. And also same for stability, so that is great news. So just moving down to the list, this also confirms that there's no regressions, so you can now move on to the next lowest scoring intent. So by working your way methodically through the worst scoring intents, fixing them, testing in QBox, addressing any regression and doing some further testing, you will gradually improve the overall correctness and confidence, and your model will become more accurate, stable and effective. I hope this gives you some helpful insight into how to improve your model.